And we are live with Chris Voshall from Mizuno Golf. You guys know him as Vosh. Chris, for those who haven't followed along, and while we wait for a bunch of people to populate in here, can you kind of give us a rundown on, you've been at Mizuno since forever.
I've been here for now, what is 2022, 18 years, which is really hard to think of. But yeah, it's been it's awesome career with Mizuno. Started as a club testing engineer. Was always a passionate golfer. I was always an engineer by study in school. And I got a job with Mizuno, basically like running our test center, which was out at Country Club of the South, still is out at Country Club of the South in Atlanta, Georgia. As that guy who buys all the golf clubs, cuts them up, tests them a little bit like you do in the THP studio, test them all and understand
That's
what
right there.
Oh, yeah, right. Not my behind you, you're behind
Yeah.
you. So, but yeah, so, from there, I did a lot of the testing and then started designing clubs for a number of years as a part of the R&D team. And just in the recent years, my role has shifted a little bit where I still work very closely with the R&D side, but I'm also working more as like a product, controlling the product in terms of what we're bringing in, how we're forecasting, what's coming next, working with the R&D, with the marketing, with the business side to kind of bring the engineering twist to everything we do, which I think works well for Mizuno.
So two things spawn of that. And one, I'm just going to come out and ask because I've gotten the question 100 times in the last 48 hours. What's up with order process shipments? How are you guys doing compared to others?
I will say we're probably a little bit on the slower side right now. And I think our new custom orders we're quoting 6 to 8 weeks. So yeah, it's a decent wait for product. But a lot of that speaks just to the strength of the brand. I mean, our market share is as high as it's ever been in every single category. We just launched the new Mizuno Pro 221, 223, 225, the Fly High, the Moe putters.
We have these.
Those right there. The ST Woods, the 220 series, and everything is just blowing out expectations. And as a result of that, yeah, we're a little bit behind in terms of custom. But one of the things we were talking about actually right before I hopped on here is a prioritization of custom over some of the stock parts. So, it's always when in the world of supply chain, are you going to run out of heads, whatever, a custom set is what we want to build over anything else. So we are taking all of our parts and focusing them towards custom right now to make sure that if you're one of those customers who has a set on order or you're thinking about it, we're going to get you your parts because it's so valuable, especially when you can get it custom.
So I'm going to jump around with questions I already have and questions that are popping up, and they're going to come up on your screen. When you first started working for Mizuno, did you ever expect to be the most recognizable person in the country that isn't an athlete in the company? And I'll go on and say maybe more recognizable. To the golfer, if you and Keith Mitchell walked into a room, they might recognize you first.
That's pretty sad. I hate to say that. No, I mean, I got a face for radio is what I always like to say. But no, I absolutely never expected that, and again, Mizuno, when I think of Mizuno, I think of Luke Donald, I think of Nick Faldo, I think of a lot of the greats that we've had over the years. Even going back on like the football side, we have some athletes like Joe Montana wore Mizuno cleats, which like a lot of people don't realize. So to think that I've become one of the people who my face is associated with the brand, it's sad for the brand, but cool for me. Like, I don't know how else to say it.
It's got to be a little humbling.
It is, but a lot of that is, I'll take a little credit for it in terms of when I entered Mizuno and, working my way up through Mizuno, I definitely tried to look for where Mizuno could benefit the most. And I felt like we really were missing out a lot on the marketing side in terms of being relatable, being a company that people understand why we do things and how we do things. I felt like we were always a company that just, here's the product. You're either going to like it or you're not. You're not going to know much about it. You're not going to know the story behind it. And it's either going to be good or it isn't. And I've tried to then work my way as an engineer to let me explain to you why we made these. Let me explain to you exactly who this works for and who it doesn't work for and why it might be something you might look at when otherwise you might not have. So trying to become a voice for the company, and I kind of stepped into that role. I'll say stepped in. I kind of shoehorned myself into that role, shoehorn hands. And I just felt like I felt like it was something that I wanted to do. So I've been fortunate enough to have a team behind me that's supported me in that endeavor. So it's cool to be recognizable as part of Mizuno.
So we're going to jump back and forth from questions into some other stuff, but obviously this week's a big week for golf, not just for that tournament going on in your state there, but we also
Mhm.
have the Victory Cup signups are happening tomorrow.
Even
No
bigger.
coincidence. We are going to TPC Sawgrass to play an island hole. Well, we're going to play all the holes, but you and your boss
Mm-hmm.
and 6 members of our forum, the lucky ones who get in. One person is already in. He used a
Mm-hmm.
golden ticket that he won to
I
be able
love
to
it.
do that. But I'm going to tell them a story on how this event came to be. You and I have been talking about this forever. We've talked
Mm-hmm.
about like every course under the sun.
Right.
And I said, well, we're going to do new irons for all the participants.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's scheduled when it is. And we won't get into those irons yet, but it's not hard based on your track record to figure out what they are. But we made the comment, you made the comment, we actually have to do wedges also. Can you kind of explain why that
Yeah.
is?
Well, it's funny because we were talking about like where we were going to do it, how we were going to do it, the timing of when we were going to do it. And then we got to, okay, we want to play based around an iron launch, which we are going to have an iron launch around that time. So, the winners of this and the participants in this will be some of the first to get their hands on some new stuff coming to market, which is pretty exciting. But then, when you're talking about where we're going, when you're talking about number 17 at Sawgrass, that's the shot. Everybody's first question is, what'd you hit? Where'd it go? What'd you do? What'd you make? And depending on who we get, I've played with some THPers who move the ball, who might be hitting wedges. And the last thing I want is for us to be standing there and them talk about, oh, well, I hit my Vokey on the green. Like, no, that's not the point. So we were talking about it first. They were all going to get irons. And I said, well, they have to get wedges too. So that's absolutely a part of it.
And we're going to live stream that, and that would have been a little awkward too. But we want to wish everybody who's signing up, there's going to be a ton of people signing up for this. Unfortunately, we can only bring 6 of you guys with us, but it's going to be a great time. And as Chris said, you're going to get new irons. You're going to get your choice of wedges. And we'll have that ordering process happen as we get closer and we kind of unveil those products. I'm going to jump back into some questions now. This is an interesting one. 921s are amazing, and being my first Mizuno set, I'm shocked at how well they play for me. Is there still a Mizuno is a better player club vibe out there?
There absolutely is. It's something that it's so hard to break that thinking of what we are. And it just goes back to that a lot of people's first encounter with Mizuno was MP14, 29, 33. Some of those classic blades is like how and how you recognize Mizuno. So just to put things into scale, our hot metal line, that's in the year 2021, it was 6% of the whole golf market. So more than 1 out of every 20 sets of irons was hot metal. Mizuno Pro or MP was like a fraction of that. So we sell so many more game improvement irons and so many more of the hot metals than we do anything else. But at the same time, that's not why people know us. And that's why you've seen the hot metal line and our game improvement line evolve to what it is today. Where if you look back to MX in the years past and some of the JPX like the 850 and stuff like that, they were really bold and bright and colorful, and that game improvement line looked like a game improvement line. We've really refined that and taken the look to almost speak to what people know from Mizuno. And that's beautiful looks, that's great solid feel, that's all those things that connect with the brand. Where if you can get those and have that better player vibe, but still get the performance you need, that's the home run right there. That's why hot metal has done what it's done.
And it is significantly more popular than people think in general, as you kind of alluded to.
Totally.
I'm going to kind of do some of these rapid fire. This one I can answer. What is the timeline for the 921 replacement? We don't talk about dates in pre-release too early, but as we just kind of alluded to with that event, I would stay tuned to that.
And there may be a little shakeup in there, but that's still TBD. So there may be a little shakeup.
I do love shakeups. What's the difference between grain flow forging and other forging?
That's one of my favorite questions because a lot of people assume that's just a fancy word for the same thing, but it's not. The grain flow forging process is different than a standard forging. Yes, it is a forging in that we're keeping the material solid. It's not a liquid poured into a mold. It's a solid billet that's hammered into shape. The difference between a grain flow forge and a standard forging is the grain flow forging is a patented process in which we stretch and bend the billet prior to forging. What that does is the reason a forging feels good is because of long continuous grains, but those long continuous grains in a standard forging could go in any direction. They could be any length. One piece might have longer grains than another, but with grain flow forging, that stretching and bending ensures that the grains go all the way from the toe up the hosel in a continuous manner. That gives you a longer, truer vibration, more consistency from piece to piece, and that feeling that the ball's like sticking on the face just a touch longer.
They'd like to know if you can redo the shoehorn hands.
Absolutely. Hopefully, y'all know what I'm talking about. I'm not psycho, I don't think, but if you want, some people want scissors for hands. I would take shoehorns for hands.
I mean, I get, sure.
It's an Enzo. It's an Enzo.
Does Mizuno have any plans to release a firmer ball than the current Torex?
We're right now deep in the development of golf balls, and the next generation, I've hit a number of them, and they're really good. There's some bigger separation from where we've been in the past, and some real refinements in that. The firmer ball is something that we have looked at, because you're right. The RB Tour and the RB Tour X, they have really soft feel, and arguably too soft for some players. So we've looked at what's the proper, whether that be the strength of the actual the cover material, whether that's the actual compression number. We've done a lot of different iterations to make sure that the next things that are coming are really hitting the market where they need to.
So let me ask you a question as it relates, because I'm seeing some of these comments about drivers, and Mizuno is, I'll even say, self-proclaimed an iron company. How do you switch? How do you get the mentality of the golfer? I know it was a long project to get where you are, and you're there now. You feel as though you can compete with anybody. How do you get the golfer to understand that better?
I think the biggest thing we've done is we've almost shown more confidence in our product. And I mean that in a couple of different ways. First off, tour promotion, how you use it, how you use your players, what players are using what. We've worked really strongly with our players now and made it a focus to make sure that all of our brand ambassadors are playing our product. To me, that's the biggest, that's the thing that people recognize of, if Luke Donald's not pulling our driver out of the bag, then he thinks something else is better. Keith Mitchell, one of the best drivers on tour, is then reaching for another driver that's not ours. That says something about what we're doing. So to me, the outward voice of that is something that we've changed. So now all of our tour players are playing our driver, and it's by choice. They're opting it for it, and we're working with them to make sure we're continuing to develop the right product for them. But another big thing from the development side, I always like to talk as an engineer and what we've done from the engineering side, is that we've established an identity where for a number of years, it felt like each year it was throwing spaghetti on a wall and seeing what would stick and seeing where it would be. Where one year we'd have a really player's super low spin driver. The next year it would be more hooked face, higher spin, deeper CG, more game improvement. And what we've done lately is we've established a platform, which is our ST platform, our speed tech platform. And we've been building upon that year after year. What's great about that from the development side is that each launch isn't the end of the story. Each launch is basically, this is where we are on this date. And now we're going to continue to refine that and make it better by the next time we're launching. So it almost gives us instead of just let's get this product done and move on to the next one, it's let's benchmark where we are at every single step. So we know that the improvements that are happening are improvements on something that was already good. And we already know where we're going to go with the next version of it.
So you mentioned engineer. I see that little logo behind you there. I got to ask what your thoughts are on what your thoughts are on the new logo. And I have two friends who went to Vanderbilt. you and a gentleman by the name, gentleman is probably in quotes, by the name of John Kim. And I apologize to you profusely that I introduced you to him because I feel like it may have changed your life dramatically.
Oh, it changed my life. All right. No,
Yeah.
John's awesome. But the new logo, I'll just say that I've signed a petition that was floating around on change.org. What that petition says, I'll leave it for you to think about.
Or look up for that matter.
Or look up.
Can you talk about the changes in chromoly? And I'm just going to come out and ask it.
Yeah.
Rather than just say, what is chromoly? Do you find that by using that as a ingredient is confusing to people, or does it just sound more exotic? Or how do you explain that, what it does?
I think it's the understanding of chromoly and why we have a lot of different versions of chromoly that we're using is not super understood. And again, I'll take some of the blame for that being from the engineering side. To me, throwing a bunch of numbers in front of it means something to me. It doesn't mean something to a lot of people, whether it's 4120 or 4135. To me, chromoly is the key behind all of that. So it's a material that we started using in our hot metal line when we launched it as hot metal. When the 950 turned into, the 850 turned into the 900, it became 900 hot metal. It gave that club an identity. And what that hot metal material, what that chromoly does, is it allows us to have a super strong high COR face, but still be malleable enough to be custom fit and bent to your proper specs. And that's something that you see a lot of times in the industry where in order to get a club hot enough, it struggles to be bent and fitters struggle with it. You can't necessarily get it all the way to your lie, all the way to your loft, like whatever you want it to be. And chromoly allows us to do that. When you look at how chromoly has evolved in our line, you've seen a 4135, a 4120, a 4125, like all sorts of different versions of chromoly, all because of what we're trying to do with them. So we had to use a slightly softer chromoly in our Mizuno Pro line, in our 223 and 225, because they are forged, it's not cast. So the club has to be, or the material has to be a little bit softer to have the proper flow characteristic to not crack when the forging mold hits it. So yeah, chromoly is something that's not fully understood, but hopefully people understand when you see chromoly, what that means is you're getting a golf club that is going to hit the ball a long way, but it's still going to have feel and custom fit ability, if that's the word.
8 players are going to the Victory Cup. Prediction on how many hit the green on 17. And if you say all, you are very much going to be wrong. No,
it won't be all of them. It will be, well, I'm going to hit the green. That's one. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I'm dialed in. I'm going to work on that, only that shot. I might shoot a million, but I'm going to hit that one. My guess is 4 of 8. 4 of 8.
So you and Jeremy, obviously, and then you're saying 2 THPers.
I didn't say that.
Interesting.
He's got a lot on his plate right now, but he's gonna figure it out. He'll be competitive.
I mean, you guys all will be competing. There'll be 2 teams. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that is the case. I want to talk a little bit about the putters.
Yeah.
First, pronounce this for people who didn't hear the podcast.
Omoi. O-M-O-I. Omoi. So
not M-O-I.
Not M-O-I. It is funny. I actually had someone ask me yesterday. I was like, what does the O in front of M-O-I stand for? And I was like, it's not. It doesn't stand for anything. So the cool story behind it is Omoi is Japanese for heavy. So it's a Japanese word, just happens to have M-O-I embedded in it. One of those times when you're thinking of a word, working on a product name, and it all just works out. That was one of them. Because the concept behind these is we took very traditional designs and we boosted the MOI of them and the overall club MOI by looking at the entire club as one, like not just the head MOI, but the actual club swinging MOI. So we took some mass out of the grip, some mass out of the shaft, focused that on the head. The head itself is heavier than the standard M-Craft. And because of that, you have a club that looks very traditional, but it performs a little bit better than it normally would.
Now, there's been a lot of talk in the putter world, and I'm going to have you put on your engineering hat. As greens have gotten faster, mm-hmm. putters have become heavier, mm-hmm. And more intricate. but the shafts for a lot of them have remained the same. Have you tested composite shafts and putters that might have a little less droop and things like that? And do you recommend people kind of go through that putter fitting like you, because you're a big fitting guy
Mhm.
throughout everything else?
Yeah, I mean, the putter shaft is one of those things that was often overlooked, and it was almost like, you know, it it was viewed that it doesn't matter. But as heads have gotten heavier, as the dynamics of the putter, the center of gravity has become more extreme in a lot of them, the shaft is going to play a role in terms of how it's going to flex and how it's going to bend. I mean, you look at some, even going back to some of the great putters in the past, use slightly softer shafts in their putters to get a little bit more almost of the proper tempo on it. So yeah, I think the actual shaft of a putter does matter absolutely, and that's why when you look at like the difference between the Mcraft and the Amoe line, the shaft is a difference in them. And that's
Mhm.
because what we were trying to do is actually make sure that the entire finished part speaks to the club philosophy of what we're trying to do with it, because they are dynamically going to do something a little bit different.
We're talking fitting, and you guys have a tool that I didn't tell you I was going to talk about, but I'm going to anyway, because you did a breakdown when you were at our studio
Mhm.
here with Dan, kind of walking through what this fitting is and how it's evolved with this current iteration. Why don't you guys talk about it more? And do you find that more people are going through it now? It's truly an exceptional tool.
Mhm.
I'm not going to say it's going to replace going to an independent club fitter or a club champion, but for the person who doesn't want to go through that, they can walk into a retail store and do this and get really exceptional information.
Yeah, the shaft optimizer is what we're talking about, and it's a really cool tool that's been. I remember the first time we were swinging a prototype version of it. This was like 15 years ago, where it was literally it was a club that had strain gauges and stuff running through it, and it had wires coming out of the back where you literally threw the wires over your left shoulder when you hit, so that we could measure all these things. And we were looking for correlations in terms of how you load and unload the shaft to see how we could recommend a shaft fitting from that. Since then we've embedded a lot of those what were chords now in terms of the microprocessor, the strain gauge, the accelerometer, now a gyro built into the club that's going to get all of these precise measurements really simply, really easily, and by just hitting a club, by hitting 2 or 3 shots, you can all of a sudden have all this data, and we can recommend your digital lie angle, which is more accurate than a standard lie angle. We can recommend the proper shaft, set makeup. We can measure your angle of attack, recommend a ball, do all sorts of different things. And it's an interesting one because we want to talk about it so much, but this is an industry that is so product driven. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's funny, we'll run metrics on everything we do, whether we tweet something, put on Instagram, whatever. And the interaction that people get when you tweet something about Shaft Optimizer doesn't line up to when you tweet a pretty picture of a blade. Granted, one of these will help 1,000 times more players than the other, but it's all about clicks.
Right.
It's all
Everybody
about
should play
that
the blades.
algorithm. So it's funny. We go back and forth on how do we talk about it? How do we embed it into our marketing? How do we bring visibility to it? Because the more people know, the more they're intrigued by it, the more they want to hit it. And that's where once we show it to a retailer, once we get a fitter to try it, man, they don't want to use anything else. It just makes life so easy. And if you're somebody who's never hit on the shaft optimizer, it can reveal a lot about your swing and a lot about your set makeup that you might not even realize.
It was weird when I went through it. It actually just kicked back saying quit golf.
Which is it's probably good programming there.
Yeah, I think it is. Now, one of the things is you're looking through your lineup of clubs. I've always said, the MP line is the glamour shots, like the
Mhm.
old days of people our age. Well, I'm a lot older than you, but walking through the mall and you see the
You're
glamour
really
shots there. Yeah,
not.
sadly I am. Um, and then you have hot metal, but with that JPX line, it's kind of segmented into two. And I
Mhm.
always felt as though, and now I'm just at this point just bantering away here, that they were separate lines. Why are they viewed together? Why is Hot Metal Pro with JPX forged and
Mhm.
not a separate unit?
You know, to differentiate between the MP and the JPX line, or the Mizuno Pro line and the JPX line, a lot of it is visual. some players want that traditional look. Some players are open to a more aggressive look. So there's a lot of overlap in the performance, even the technologies, the materials. There's a lot of overlap in terms of what we do. You look at a 223 and a JPX 921 forged, and they actually share a lot of similarities other than what they look like from behind. So when we're developing our line, there's a lot of viewing the market in terms of what are people looking for, what can we do in a given package. In a Mizuno MP package where you're talking small, thin, compact, not a lot of funky looks from behind, you can only do so much. In a JPX package, you can do a little bit more because it's okay to put a massive weight out on the toe. It's okay to have a scoop taken out of the back and towards the heel. It's okay to be a little bit wider on a hot metal, and it's okay to be, a little bit, I don't even know what other example, but
stronger lofted.
Yeah, stronger lofted, exactly. But even those handcuffs are coming off a little bit with like the 223 and the 225 are getting a little bit stronger lofted. But the perfect example is if you look at like the JPX Tour. The JPX Tour, it shares everything about it is the 221. It's the muscle back. Aside from it doesn't have the copper underlay, and the look from behind is a little bit more aggressive. We used to have a CB model within our MP18 line, and the MP18 CB, or I guess we called it SC, split cavity, that basically was a JPX Tour. So those two clubs are really speaking to the same part of the market. But it's funny how we've now taken Mizuno Pro and stretched it a little bit to the higher handicap, or players who want a little bit more forgiveness with the HMB and with the 225 and the JPX. We pulled it the other direction, and it's all about having the different offerings to make sure you're speaking to the right parts of the market, because some players demand that small look and some players want something more techy.
This is a question that I'm putting up, even though we aren't going to talk about new releases, but we're going to talk a little bit about blending of sets, because companies are now coming around. You guys have been there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Combo sets, are you for, against? I have this weird thing with them, a lot like I do with ferrules, but we'll save that for another conversation. If you're a point and shoot golfer that's not looking to flight work or anything else, I'm a big believer that many golfers would benefit from just going for the largest sole they can look at.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you see a lot of times, especially in my world on the internet, golfers are trending towards, let me get that in the longer irons, and then when I get to the 7 or 8, I want something, I'll say pretty.
Mm-hmm.
The Duff, the designated ugly fat friend, also is pretty. But where do you stand on the split sets? When I've played with you,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have a split set in any of those cases, other than you going pitching wedge into the wedge lineup. Right. But where do you stand on that? And do you think Mizuno in general is all in on that concept?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the split set it's really valuable in terms of making or giving the fitter and giving the customer the right options. If you design one set and say this one set's for everybody, no, I play my 7-iron different than some people play their 7-iron. I might play my 6-iron the same, but a 7 different. To me, it's all about, and like the question I always ask myself when I'm saying, am I going to split a set or am I not? It's like, at what point in the set am I just worried about it going straight? Or at what point am I worried about being able to flight it down? But to me, that's where if you're gonna do some splits, that's where it has to happen. So like, me, for example, I don't usually try to work the ball that much. So everything usually stays within the same set until I get to like my longest iron, in which case it's more about just, I want this to go higher. And then I'd select something that would go a little bit higher.
You're a fly high guy, right?
Yeah, I do. I have the Mizuno Pro Fly High as my longest iron. But, having those options and then designing them well so that they can seamlessly integrate together, that's the key. And that's where, to make a split set, if it's not designed to be split, then you're going to have some problems. You're going to have some, jumps in COR, you're going to have some jumps in speed, you're going to have jumps in spin, and all of a sudden, loft doesn't tell the whole story. If you don't properly,
you can't say that on the internet. Everybody says loft is the only thing that matters.
And loft, absolute loft is big, But man, there's some other things that you can overcome that. And you got to look at like, where do I go from a 3 degrees to 4 degrees or 4 degrees to 5 degrees? And maybe you can get away with going from, these two clubs are 4 degrees apart. This one's now only 3 degrees apart, but I had a COR jump on top of that. Like you can do some things to overcome some loft handcuffs. Ultimately, loft is going to dictate, your speed combined with the loft is going to tell you, is this a viable club for me? Center of gravity can do a lot, but it can't make me be able to hit a 15-degree iron. Like, it can only do so much. So ultimately, loft is king. I always say that.
I mean, it could if you call it a hybrid.
Yeah, but then you'd have to pull other things as well. Like to get 15 degrees in the air, you need more speed. Speed's going to come from length, and also combined with maybe getting lighter as well. But if you just made like a 1-iron, an old school traditional 1-iron, I got no chance with that. But I can hit a 15-degree 3-wood. So, it's all the different levers that you pull on that. But yeah, to get back to the original question, to me, combo sets are massive. And it's the sign of a good family if you can combine them. It's a sign of well thought out designs, is that we're not trying to shove everybody right here and say, this is for you. This isn't Uniflex. Like this is whatever. This is like, we want to make it specifically for you. And golf clubs are an investment these days. So why wouldn't you want that?
So you mentioned something about, we've been talking about split sets, and you mentioned something about your, moving into wedges. And I have a question that I don't think I've asked you before, and nobody else is clearly going to ask because they don't care, I guess. You guys are known as the iron company, soft, forged, everything about that. And then you move to wedges, which are soft, forged, and you're not really known for wedges. Why is that, and how do you change it? And I'll go a step further. If ABC golfer, who probably is a forum member, walks into a golf store and they go to the wedge area, they see every single loft, grind, and configuration of a number of companies, and then they get to Mizuno and it's every 2 degrees. Now, obviously, you guys can bend those and things like that, but how do you go to being a big player in wedges? And do you even want to be a big player in wedges?
We absolutely want to, and right now there's a Goliath in the wedge world, and they're a Goliath because they offer a lot of different really good performing wedges. There's no doubt they're really good wedges, but you're right. I mean, we speak the benefits of forging, of the soft, solid, consistent feel, and nowhere is that as valuable as it is in the short game. To have a more consistent pitching wedge is way more important than having a more consistent 3-iron. You're going to hit one way more than the other one. So we truly believe that players who recognize the benefits of forgings should recognize that in the wedge as well. And one of the things that held us back for a number of years is that, because of forging, mold costs more, we're trying to be more efficient, whatever, we didn't have as many loft and bounce options, and sole grinds at that. What you've seen over the last couple of years is an increase in those offerings. And that's really, it's an investment on our side to really, make sure we're servicing the customer properly. We want to make sure we have the lofts and bounces that they need, and grind is so important. So now you'll see 4 different grinds available in our T22 wedge. We got a bunch of different finishes, different grinds.
The Denim Finish is the greatest finish ever created.
The denim turned out really nice. It's a denim copper, if you haven't seen it. The copper underlay is something that lives in our entire Mizuno Pro line. It makes it feel softer. And basically, we just put that copper on the outside, and it looks really cool, feels great, and ultimately, the performance is there. So we truly believe we should be a bigger player in the wedge market. And you're going to continue to see us evolve our wedge line to make sure we're going to be, thought about like some of the other guys are.
Now, I just got an email that has nothing to do with golf. And if they follow either you or I on Twitter, they will know that you and I talk about nothing to do with golf. It's
right.
Almost always about weird food quirks. And this goes kind of with a question I got earlier in the thing about if they get into the Victory Cup, do they have to eat salad? Now, you're a vegetarian. This body is clearly not built by veggies. We will be able to feed you properly, but can you kind of talk us through, give us your 3 food rules? We have a thread on THP right now about give us your food cancellation take. And there's some pretty crazy stuff. give us some like 3 of your food rules that you think would shock people, other than not eating meat, of course.
Well, yeah, if you follow Josh and my back and forth a lot, the one rule, it's a hard rule. Breakfast is breakfast. Like, what are you doing eating breakfast for dinner? Like, that's just silly. Why would you do that?
Because
So
waffles are amazing.
in the morning, you're absolutely right. But then you can be a grown up at some point when you go out and actually get into the world. So my food takes. You had a food take. I almost commented on one of yours the other day. I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was spot on. I'm trying to remember what you said.
I mean,
What,
they all are. Is it that Taco Bell's better than Chipotle? Because it is.
yeah, it was actually. That was the one. I agree with you there.
Yeah, it is.
But that's a big one to me. I think, and again, I'm vegetarian. Everyone's gonna probably hate this, but so many people are afraid of Indian food. It's the best food out there. To me, that's Indian food over Italian food all day
But
long.
when you think of Indian food, doesn't the scene from Along Came Polly just stick in your head?
Absolutely, which is a great scene.
Now, you go to a golf course, it's breakfast time. Do you grab, I mean, is a breakfast sandwich good? Obviously, no bacon or sausage on there, but breakfast sandwich good?
Yeah, I'll get a breakfast sandwich. I'm typically not a morning eater. Like I
I'm not
actually,
either, for what it's worth.
yeah, I don't. I'll get one if their beans are vegetarian or something like that on a
Okay,
breakfast.
so that's a joke for you guys that aren't here. We were in Vegas for one of our events, and we go to this diner, and a couple of you guys might have been there for this. And Chris leans over to the server as she's taking our orders, and he says, "Are your beans vegetarian?" Meaning, are they cooked on the same thing as bacon and other things?
Or do they have lard in
Yeah.
them, which a lot of times they do.
This person turned to him and looked at him like he had 7 heads and said, "Sir, they're beans." And it was the most awkward 10 seconds we would ever have at one of our events, but it was great. So obviously, switching back to not our food talk for the insane, new line, the season's here. What are you most excited about with Mizuno for this season? Like, the Masters is here, Victory Cup signups are here. What are you excited about?
Man, I got a couple answers for that, which I hate to be the guy who just sprinkles the entire line. But man, the new woods are phenomenal. For those who haven't hit the new woods, and it's funny how we're still, there's one right behind you. We're not thought about on the wood side nearly enough. We have made some incredible product over the last couple of years. The new STZ and STX are awesome. I put the STZ in a couple weeks ago. It is one of the straightest hitting low spin drivers out there. Typically those two things are like spread apart. You get one or the other. And it's done a fantastic job of being low spin and extremely stable. And
so let me ask you that, because that seems to be a misnomer on the internet in general about who these are for. It's the thought of the X is super draw biased and the Z is fade biased, and that's really not the case. Can you kind of explain the differences between the two?
Yeah, so the naming and where it comes from, again, speaking to the nerdiness of the engineer helping to run the marketing department, is the Z. The Z is the Z axis, the X is the X axis. The X axis is going to determine, move the center of gravity a little bit closer to the hosel. Easier to turn over, but that's a very simplified way to think about it. There's
because
more
it's not a closed driver.
It's not a closed driver. Exactly. It's not like a hook driver. If you think about some of the offset and shut faces and all that, we don't do that at Mizuno. So it's one that is easier to turn over and one that actually puts the player in a little bit more control. So it's what moving along the x-axis does is it lowers the moment of inertia about the shaft axis. I'll get nerdy now. That means that it's easier to manipulate, and the club is in less control, the player's in more control. If you think about on the iron world, the shortest CG to shaft axis, the lowest MOI about the shaft axis in the iron world is a muscle back. A muscle back is not draw bias. A muscle back is easy to manipulate because the club doesn't try to take over. With the STX, it's that same philosophy of moving that x-axis or moving that center of gravity along the x-axis towards the hosel, makes it a golf club that's actually easier to fade than the STZ is. The STZ with the deeper center of gravity and with that center of gravity pulled along the Z-axis in the front to back direction, the club takes over more. So the club does more of the heavy lifting. It's tougher to manipulate, it's tougher to knock down, it's tougher to cut, tougher to draw. It just wants to go straight. So that's one of the biggest misunderstandings about the line. And that's where you really got to get out and give them a shot and see which one might fit you better. Because a lot of better players could really benefit from the X.
Did you call yourself not a better player?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I just want it to go straight.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, to me, with a driver, if you told me that every drive would go straight, I'm like, okay, I'll take that. You can't get in too much trouble if you're hitting the ball straight.
I'm going to not take all day with you, but we're talking drivers and I have to ask, since they were leaked on our website, there was an image of a limited edition. I'm not going to ask you about that product specifically. That's not fair, but what is Mizuno going to get into the limited edition game throughout the year? And moving forward, we're going to, you guys have some diehard fans and all these other fans, they have, head covers. You have some cool head covers, mind you. Other than those pom-pom things, those are horrible. But will we start seeing some of that fun, exciting stuff from Mizuno where you can drop something and say, and by the way, Chris has no idea I'm asking him this, where you could start saying like, yeah, you want this. You may have that already, but you want this. It's cool.
Yeah, that's something that we definitely are looking to get into more. And the first kind of dipping our toe in that market was when we did the Mp20 Coppers. So we launched them with, copper set of irons.
Still waiting for my set to arrive.
Yeah, me too, right? No, they turned out really nice. And it was one of those things where we did 500 sets of them. So you get them, they sell them through, whatever. But a lot of players, it's funny how many people, we thought it would totally be just a thing you put on your wall. And a lot of people played them, which is totally fine. There was a leak on your site, which is totally okay, because if you're viewing this 24 hours after it came after this initial live, you might see more leaks, because we are going to have some limited edition products coming more this year. So you'll probably see one on the Thursday of the Masters tomorrow, and you'll probably see one a little bit later.
It's called Victory Cup Thursday.
There you go. It is. So we're thinking about another one later on that, again, hopefully it's something, again, we don't know for sure if we're going to do it. We're testing some things to try to make some cool stuff, and it's got to be the right product, because when you're talking limited edition, it's got to be cool. It's got to be unique. So.
Well, we're not going to take up all day with you. We're going to kind of fill you in tomorrow on how the signups are going and everything else. But for everybody tuning in and those who are going to come later, because there's going to be a lot of you guys catch this after the fact, obviously look for something tomorrow per Chris and sign up for the Victory Cup. And we will talk to you guys soon.
Can't wait to see y'all. The lucky guys who join us at Sawgrass is going to be amazing. Can't wait for the first, I guess you don't say the first annual, just the first ever Victory Cup is going to be awesome.
That's right. Goodbye, everybody.